Sunlight streamed through the stained glass, casting dancing rainbows across the marble floor. The chapel, adorned with lilies and roses, was filled with an orchestra of soft murmurs, the fluttering of programs, and gentle laughter. I took a deep breath, the sweet scent of flowers calming my nerves. My best friend Clara tightened the corset of my dress and whispered, "You look beautiful, Susan. Mark is a lucky man." I smiled, my reflection revealing a radiant bride. "Thank you. She winked, cold feet. "No," I laughed. "It's not that. It's just, today is such a significant day. It changes everything." The chapel doors swung open. Heart fluttering, I stepped into the aisle. All eyes turned to me, but my gaze was fixed on Mark, who stood at the altar. Instead of the warm, loving gaze I was expecting, his eyes seemed distant, as though they held a weight of 1,000 thoughts. As I approached, our officiant, Reverend Matthews, began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." While the Reverend's voice boomed, I tried to catch Mark's eyes, to share a private smile, a silent reassurance. But he seemed lost in his own world. My father, sensing my unease, whispered as he handed me to Mark, "Take care of her." Mark nodded, forcing a tight-lipped smile, always. The ceremony progressed, and as we exchanged our vows, Mark's voice was steady. But the warmth, the passion, it seemed absent. "I, Mark, take you, Susan, to be my wife. In sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. And I, Susan, take you, Mark, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward," I echoed, trying to put as much love and warmth into my words, hoping it would elicit the same from him. The ceremony ended, the crowd cheered, but the pit in my stomach remained. At our reception, while everyone danced and celebrated, I pulled Mark aside. "Is everything okay?" I asked, searching his eyes. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just work, Susan." "Today's about us, okay? Let's focus on that." I nodded, but the worry lingered, casting a shadow over what was meant to be the happiest day of our lives. After the wedding, our old house greeted us with memories of simpler times. The creaky wooden floors, the quaint little fireplace, and the window overlooking the rose garden. It all seemed like the perfect setting for our love story to unfold. The first few weeks were like a dream. We'd wake up to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and Mark would be in the kitchen, a mess of eggs, bacon, and toast laid out before him. "Morning, Mrs. Thompson," he'd greet with a playful wink, his title for me that never failed to make me blush. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," I'd reply, wrapping my arms around him. "What's the special occasion?" He'd grin, "Being married to you." In those moments, the worry from the wedding faded. We'd spend nights cuddling on the couch, binge, watching our favorite shows or trying out new recipes, laughing at our culinary mishaps. On weekends, we'd explore nearby towns, hand in hand, sampling the local delicacies and buying odd trinkets. One evening, as we sat in our backyard, Mark pointed at the stars. "That one's us." I squinted. "Which one?" He gently guided my gaze. "See that tiny, bright star next to the big one? That's you, illuminating my world." I nestled into his chest, and "You're my rock, always there, grounding me." But while the days were filled with love, some nights, when Mark thought I was asleep, I'd catch him gazing out of the window, lost in thought. The specter of the wedding day would return, making me wonder what was really going on in his mind. One such night, I decided to address it. "Mark," I whispered, "is everything truly okay?" He took a moment before responding, just reminiscing about the past and thinking about our future. "Anything you want to talk about?" He pulled me closer. "Not now. Let's just enjoy this. We have forever." The assurance in his voice was comforting, but deep down, a tiny seed of doubt remained. Still, with every shared laugh, every kiss, every whispered promise, I held on to the hope that we were building something beautiful and lasting. Months slipped by, and with them, the ease that had once defined our relationship. The house, once filled with shared laughter and spontaneous dance sessions, now resonated with a palpable tension. Mark's late nights became more frequent. Initially, I brushed it off as the demands of his job, but then the scent of alcohol began to accompany him home. He'd stumble in, the familiar, vibrant spark in his eyes replaced with a dull haze. One evening, I prepared his favorite meal, hoping to rekindle a semblance of our earlier days. As he walked in, I greeted him with a hopeful smile. "Thought you could use some comfort food after a long day." He glanced at the table, then at me, his voice flat, not hungry. The hurt stung, but I pushed it aside. "Mark, is everything okay at work? You've been distant." He shrugged, taking a long swig from the beer bottle. "Work's just busy." I approached him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Talk to me. Maybe I can help or at least be there for you." He flinched away. "There's nothing to talk about." The nights turned colder, the bed vaster. We'd lay side by side, yet the distance felt insurmountable. His touch, once warm and reassuring, now felt distant, almost reluctant. One weekend, when he was out again, Clara visited. She noticed the strain immediately. "Susan," she began, her voice filled with concern. "What's going on?" I sighed, staring into my tea. "I don't know, Clara. It's like he's pulling away, building walls I can't breach." Clara considered this, then said, "Have you tried counseling? Maybe there's something he's struggling with." "I've suggested it," I admitted, but he brushes it off, saying we don't need it. As days turned to weeks, the vibrant, loving man I'd married became a shadow. Conversations became perfunctory, punctuated by long silences. The joy we once found in each other's company was replaced with a heavy atmosphere, each of us tiptoeing around the other, the unspoken issues between us growing like a chasm. The once warm and comforting home now felt like a house divided, and I was left grappling with the haunting question: how did we get here? Amidst the thickening gloom of our relationship, a tiny glimmer of hope arrived. One morning, feeling queasier than usual, I took a home pregnancy test. The 2 pink lines stared back at me, a testament to a new life burgeoning within. The surge of emotions was overwhelming. Excitement, anxiety, joy, and apprehension intermingled. In this baby, I saw an opportunity for Mark and me to reconnect, to remember the love that had drawn us together. I decided to break the news over dinner. In an effort to recreate the intimacy we once shared, I prepared a lavish meal, lit candles, and played soft melodies in the background. When Mark walked in, he raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" I smiled, taking a deep breath. "I have some news." He looked intrigued. "Go on." Holding up the pregnancy test, my voice trembled with excitement. "We're going to be parents, Mark." For a moment, he was silent. Then, instead of the joyous reaction I expected, his face turned ashen, his eyes reflecting a storm of emotions. Now, with everything going on, I felt as if the wind had been knocked out of me. The candles flickered, the atmosphere in the room turning cold. I thought this would be a happy moment for us, I whispered, tears brimming. He rubbed his temples. "It's just a lot to process." Days following the revelation became even tenser. Clara visited again, and seeing the strain on my face, pulled me aside. "What happened, Susan?" Tears spilled as I relayed the conversation. She wrapped her arms around me. "Maybe he's just scared. It's a big change." "I know," I sniffled, "but I thought he'd be happy that this baby would bridge the gap between us." She sighed. "Life doesn't always follow our script." The subsequent weeks saw Mark retreating further into his shell. Whereas before he'd at least try to converse, now he became almost entirely unresponsive. Every attempt at bridging the gap was met with silence or a curt reply. The house felt colder, heavier, the weight of unspoken words and unresolved feelings pressing down on us. Yet amid this storm, the tiny heartbeat growing inside me became my anchor. Every doctor's visit, every ultrasound, every tiny kick was a reminder that even in the darkest times, life could offer glimmers of hope. But as my belly grew, so did the distance between Mark and me, casting a shadow on what should have been a joyous occasion. The clock ticked away as I sat alone, the glow of the lamplight casting a melancholy halo around the room. 8 months into my pregnancy, and the tension had escalated to an unbearable point. I was on the phone with my mother, recounting my latest doctor's visit. Her voice, ever so soothing, was a balm to my weary soul. "You're almost there, Susan. Just focus on yourself and the baby now. Everything else will sort itself out." Before I could reply, the door burst open, slamming against the wall. Mark staggered in, his face flushed, eyes bloodshot, reeking of alcohol. "Why don't you clean the house? I'm going to kick you out," he yelled, his voice devoid of any warmth or love. "What are you talking about, Mark? You can't just—" I began, but before I could finish, he lunged at me, his fist connecting with my stomach. The pain was blinding, a sharp, excruciating twist in my gut. I cried out, clutching my belly, fearing the worst for our unborn child. My mother, having heard the entire ordeal on the phone, screamed, "Susan, what's happening?" "Call the police, Mom." Now, I managed to gasp between clenched teeth. Sirens blared in the distance, growing louder until they screeched to a halt outside our home. The police burst in, their faces stern, handcuffs at the ready. Seeing Mark's volatile state and my pained expression, they didn't hesitate to restrain him. "Are you all right, Mom?" one of the officers asked, his face filled with concern. "I don't know," I replied, tears streaming down my face. "I need to go to the hospital." They arranged for an ambulance, and as the MCs hurriedly checked my vitals, I couldn't help but cast a glance at Mark. His face was a blend of anger and something else. Remorse, perhaps? But it was too late. Too late for regrets, too late for what-ifs. At the hospital, the doctors rushed me into the ER for immediate checks and ultrasounds. Thankfully, the baby was unharmed. But something inside me had broken, something far deeper than physical pain, a profound rupture that no amount of time or words could mend. The following weeks were a whirlwind of lawyers, court dates, and divorce papers. Mark was sentenced to 10 years in prison for domestic abuse, and our marriage was officially dissolved. My heart, although shattered, held a different kind of resolve now. For the sake of my child, for the sake of my own dignity, I had to rebuild, even if I had to do it alone. Months after the trial, the house felt different. Gone was the oppressive atmosphere, replaced by a sense of serenity. I took the time to repaint the walls, replace the furniture, and add new life to the old space. Each stroke of the paintbrush, every tightened screw, felt like a small but significant step toward reclaiming my life. My mother was my rock during this period, frequently visiting to help prepare for the baby's arrival. "You're stronger than you think, Susan," she'd say, her eyes brimming with both pride and sorrow. One evening, Clara came over with a housewarming gift. "A small potted plant. It's a peace lily," she explained, setting it on the coffee table. "A symbol of rebirth and new beginnings." I hugged her tightly, Thank you, Claire. That means the world to me." As the due date approached, the house filled with the gentle sounds of lullabies and the soft hues of baby blankets and onesies. The nursery became a sanctuary, each item carefully selected, each color chosen to provide a sense of warmth and love. Finally, the day arrived. Contractions started early in the morning, a rhythmic dance of pain and anticipation. At the hospital, as each contraction rolled over me like a tidal wave, my mother held my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "You can do this," she encouraged, her eyes meeting mine. And I believed her. With a final push, my daughter came into the world, her cries filling the room like a triumphant melody. As the nurse placed her in my arms, I looked down at her tiny face and was filled with an overwhelming sense of love and protectiveness. "She's beautiful," my mother whispered, tears of joy rolling down her cheeks. "She's my redemption," I replied, my own eyes misty. I named her Lily, inspired by the peace lily that Claire had gifted me. A tribute to the new life both of us were embarking upon. As I held her close, I felt a shift within me. A new sense of purpose ignited, overshadowing the past, fueling my resolve to provide Lily with all the love and security she deserved. Life was no longer just about me. It was about the beautiful baby girl cradled in my arms. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely optimistic. Yes, I had suffered, faced betrayals, and endured loss. But here, in this tender moment, I found my redemption. And as Lily grasped my finger with her tiny hand, I realized she had given me something invaluable. A reason to hope, a reason to live, and a reason to love unconditionally. Years rolled by, and Lily blossomed into a vibrant, happy child, her laughter filling the corners of our home like sunlight filtering through windows. I returned to work, my mother often babysitting, and between the 3 generations of women, we built a sanctuary of love and trust. One sunny afternoon, I took Lily to the park. She ran around gleefully, her small feet barely touching the ground, her laughter echoing through the air. "You really have a wonderful daughter," a voice spoke beside me. I turned to find a man, probably in his late 30s, watching his own child. A boy, around Lily's age. "Thank you," I smiled. "It's been a journey." "Aren't they all?" He laughed. His name was David, and as our kids played, we talked. About life, about single parenthood. He was a widower, and about the oddities of fate. Weeks went by, and the accidental meetings became planned playdates. Friendship blossomed into something more, something that made my heart flutter in a way I thought it had forgotten. One evening, David invited Lily and me to dinner at his place. The house was warm and inviting, filled with the aroma of home-cooked food. "You're a much better cook than me," I admitted as he served up a delicious pasta dish. "I had to learn. My son wasn't a big fan of cereal for dinner," he joked. We laughed, and for a moment everything felt perfect. The kids were busy with their toys, and David and I shared a serene moment at the dining table. "Susan," he began hesitantly, "I've been wanting to talk to you about something." I looked up, meeting his eyes. "Sure, what's on your mind?" He took a deep breath. "I know we both have pasts that have marked us, changed us in irreversible ways. But I look at you and I see a future. I see a partner. Would you be willing to explore that? With me?" The vulnerability in his eyes mirrored my own innermost fears and hopes. For a split second, the scars of my past relationships flashed before me. But then I looked at Lily playing happily with David's son, and I realized that we had both found happiness in unexpected places, and perhaps it was time to turn the page. "I'd like that," I replied softly. "I'd really like that, David." As days turned into months, David and I did explore that future cautiously at first, but with growing confidence and love. We merged our broken families into one beautifully imperfect whole, showing each other that while the past may shape us, it doesn't define us. Life came full circle. The house that was once a symbol of my failed marriage became the cornerstone of my new family, a family built on love, trust, and the promise of new beginnings. And so, as the dawn broke on another day, I finally understood. Happiness wasn't a constant state, but a fleeting moment, captured in between the struggles and victories of life. And I had captured it, held it close, and was never letting go.